Jasmine Robinson's scream pierces the cabin as her brother Malcolm convulses from the taser's electricity. Passengers frantically film with phones while flight attendant Heather stands over Malcolm, taser still pointed. A powerful voice cuts through chaos. "I'm Benjamin Washington, civil rights attorney and this boy's father." Tension freezes the airplane cabin. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more real stories about justice being served in the most unexpected places. Now let's find out how a routine flight turned into a battleground for civil rights. The Washington family had been planning this trip for months. Benjamin Washington, a highly respected civil rights attorney at 45 years old, had just won a landmark police brutality case that made national headlines. The National Bar Association had selected him to receive their prestigious Lifetime Achievement Award at their annual conference in Los Angeles. For Benjamin, having his family witness this honor meant everything. On that Wednesday morning in July, Benjamin and his wife Keisha herded their 17-year-old twins, Malcolm and Jasmine, through Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The family moved with purpose, navigating the crowded terminal with practiced ease. "Dad, I still can't believe you're getting this award," Malcolm said, adjusting his navy blue blazer. Tall and lanky like his father, Malcolm had inherited Benjamin's analytical mind and passion for justice. As captain of his high school debate team, he was already showing promise as a future attorney. "It's not about the award, son," Benjamin replied, checking their boarding passes. "It's about what it represents. 25 years of fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves." Keisha, a medical researcher specializing in cardiovascular health disparities, squeezed her husband's arm. "And we couldn't be prouder." Jasmine, scrolling through her phone, looked up. "Mom, I've already posted about Dad's award on Instagram. People are loving it." Unlike her reserved brother, Jasmine was outgoing and socially conscious, using her social media presence to highlight social justice issues. When their flight was called, the Washington family boarded Atlantic Airways Flight 3387 to Los Angeles. Benjamin nodded politely to the flight attendants at the entrance, receiving warm smiles from most of the crew. "Welcome aboard," greeted Jake, a young male flight attendant with sandy blonde hair. "Congratulations on your award, Mr. Washington. We're honored to have you flying with us today." Benjamin looked surprised. "You know about that? Your daughter's Instagram post is going viral," Jake grinned, gesturing toward Jasmine, who beamed with pride. As the family made their way down the aisle to their seats in premium economy, another flight attendant caught Benjamin's attention. Unlike her colleagues, Heather Bailey, a 38-year-old veteran flight attendant with streaked blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, didn't make eye contact with the Washington family. Instead, she seemed unusually focused on checking overhead compartments as they passed. The family settled into their seats, Benjamin and Keisha in one row, Malcolm and Jasmine directly behind them. As other passengers boarded, Benjamin noticed something odd. Heather warmly greeted white passengers, helping them stow luggage and offering pre-flight beverages, while giving only curt nods to black passengers. "Did you notice that?" Keisha whispered, nodding subtly toward Heather. Benjamin nodded but kept his voice low. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Maybe she's just having a bad day." Once everyone was seated and the safety demonstration completed, the flight attendants began their initial beverage service. Jake served the left side of the cabin while Heather took the right side, where the Washington family was seated. When Heather reached their row, she served the white businessman sitting by the window first, offering him a warm smile. "What can I get for you today, sir?" "Just water, please," he replied, receiving a full bottle and a glass of ice. Without acknowledging Keisha in the middle seat, Heather then leaned across to serve the white woman in the aisle seat of Benjamin's row. "Excuse me," Keisha said politely. "Could I have some water as well?" Heather seemed startled, as if just noticing Keisha. "Oh. Sure." She handed Keisha a plastic cup with no ice, no bottle, and moved on. In the row behind, Malcolm and Jasmine exchanged glances as they waited for service. Heather served the passengers in the row across the aisle, then started to push her cart forward. "Excuse me," Malcolm called politely. "We haven't been served yet." Heather turned, her expression hardening. "I'll come back around." Jasmine frowned. "But you just served everyone else in our section." "I said I'll come back around," Heather repeated, her tone sharp. An elderly white woman seated across from Malcolm raised her hand. "Excuse me, dear, could I have some ginger ale?" Heather's demeanor instantly transformed. "Of course. Would you like ice with that?" Several passengers nearby noticed the contrast in treatment, uncomfortable glances exchanged across the cabin. One woman, Sarah Wilson, a 42-year-old white passenger seated across the aisle from Malcolm, caught his eye and gave him a sympathetic look. 20 minutes later, Heather still hadn't returned to serve the twins. Jake, passing through the cabin, noticed Malcolm and Jasmine without drinks. "Haven't you been served yet?" he asked, concerned. "No," Jasmine replied. "The other flight attendant said she'd come back, but..." "I'll take care of you right now," Jake assured them, quickly returning with drinks and snacks. "I'm sorry about that. It must have been an oversight." As Jake served them, Heather reappeared in the aisle. Seeing what was happening, her expression darkened. "Jake," she said sharply. "You're needed in the galley." "Just finishing up here," he replied. "Now," Heather insisted. "I'll take over." Jake looked confused but complied. As soon as he left, Heather turned to Malcolm. "What else do you need?" she asked, her tone making it clear she found the request burdensome. "We're fine now, thank you," Malcolm replied politely, though his jaw was tight. As Heather walked away, Jasmine discreetly took out her phone and began recording, capturing Heather's interactions with other passengers. "What are you doing?" Malcolm whispered. "Documenting," Jasmine replied quietly. "Dad always says, if you feel something's wrong, document everything." The plane hit a patch of turbulence, causing the cabin to shake. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft ding. "All passengers, please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts," the captain announced over the intercom. "We're experiencing some moderate turbulence." As the plane steadied, Keisha turned around to check on her children. "Everything okay back there?" Malcolm nodded, but his usual enthusiasm was dampened. "We're fine, Mom." Keisha gave Benjamin a meaningful look. He nodded slightly, understanding her concern. "It's a long flight," he said quietly. "Let's not worry about it for now." But as the plane continued its journey westward, the tension in cabin section 4B was palpable, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. 3 hours into the 6-hour flight, most passengers had settled into the rhythm of long-distance travel. Some dozed under thin airline blankets, others watched movies on the seatback screens, and a few worked on laptops, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of their screens. Malcolm, having finished the book he brought, reached for the overhead call button to request headphones for the in-flight entertainment system. Jake responded to the call, approaching with a friendly smile. "What can I help you with?" he asked. "Could I get a pair of headphones, please?" Malcolm asked. "Absolutely, be right back," Jake replied, returning moments later with packaged headphones. "Here you go. Anything else I can get you?" Before Malcolm could respond, Heather appeared at Jake's side. "Jake, they need you in first class," she said, her voice tight. "I'll handle this." Jake looked confused. "I was just..." "It's fine," Heather interrupted. "Go on." As Jake reluctantly left, Heather turned to Malcolm, her smile disappearing. "What's the problem now?" "No problem," Malcolm replied calmly. "Jake was just bringing me headphones." Heather glanced at the package in Malcolm's hand. "Those are premium headphones. They're $5. "Oh, Jake didn't mention." "Of course he didn't," Heather cut in. "That's why we have procedures. You can use the complimentary earbuds or pay for the premium ones." Malcolm reached for his wallet. "That's fine, I'll pay for them." "You should have mentioned you wanted to purchase headphones when you called for assistance," Heather said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "It wastes our time when passengers are difficult." Malcolm's face flushed with embarrassment, but his voice remained steady. "I wasn't aware of the difference. I apologize for the confusion." Jasmine, witnessing the exchange, discreetly held her phone at lap level, recording the interaction. Sarah Wilson, the passenger across the aisle, leaned forward. "Excuse me, but I don't think he was being difficult at all. He simply asked for headphones." Heather's eyes narrowed at Sarah's intervention. "Ma'am, I'm handling this situation." "There shouldn't be a situation to handle," Sarah replied calmly. "He asked for headphones, just like I did earlier. The only difference I'm seeing is how you're treating him." Heather's face tightened. "I'll need to take payment for those headphones now," she said to Malcolm, ignoring Sarah's comment. Malcolm handed over his credit card. Heather processed the payment and returned the card without another word, walking briskly toward the galley. From several rows ahead, a white teenage boy raised his hand. "Excuse me, could I get some headphones?" Heather, now halfway up the aisle, turned with a warm smile. "Of course. Would you like the complimentary ones or the premium ones?" "What's the difference?" the boy asked. "The premium ones have better sound quality and are more comfortable," Heather explained patiently. "They're $5, but many passengers find them worth it for a long flight." The contrast was stark and unmistakable. In the galley, passengers could hear Heather complaining loudly to another crew member. "These passengers in row 27 are being so difficult today. I don't know what their problem is." Benjamin, overhearing this, took a deep breath and remained in his seat. As a civil rights attorney, he'd learned to choose his battles carefully. Making a scene mid-flight would only escalate the situation and potentially make things worse for his family. Instead, he began making notes on his phone, documenting times, names, and specific incidents. Keisha reached across to touch his arm. "You okay?" "Just documenting," he replied quietly. "Let's see how this plays out." Meanwhile, Malcolm put on his newly purchased headphones and selected a movie, determined not to let Heather's treatment ruin his trip. Jasmine, however, continued to observe and occasionally record Heather's interactions with different passengers, noting the stark contrast in her demeanor. Sarah Wilson leaned across the aisle again. "Hey," she said softly to Malcolm. "I just want you to know that was completely inappropriate how she treated you." Malcolm nodded appreciatively. "Thank you for speaking up." "I'm a mom too," Sarah replied. "I wouldn't want someone treating my son that way." The cabin atmosphere grew increasingly uncomfortable as more passengers became aware of Heather's behavior pattern. Some exchanged uncomfortable glances, while others deliberately avoided eye contact, retreating into the false privacy of their seatback screens. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Dylan Brady speaking. We're expecting some moderate turbulence as we cross over the Rocky Mountains in about 20 minutes. At that time, I'll be turning on the fasten seatbelt sign, and I'll ask all passengers and crew to return to their seats until we've passed through the rough air. Thank you for your cooperation." The announcement added a layer of anxiety to the already tense atmosphere in the cabin. Malcolm glanced out the window at the vast landscape below, hoping the rest of the flight would pass without further incident. Unfortunately, the turbulence ahead wasn't just meteorological. Approximately 4 hours into the flight, the illuminated seatbelt sign had been on for about 15 minutes due to the predicted turbulence. The plane occasionally shuddered as it navigated through rough air pockets, but the ride wasn't particularly severe. Despite the illuminated sign, several passengers had made their way to the bathrooms without comment from the flight crew. Malcolm shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had a recurring kidney condition that sometimes required more frequent bathroom visits, especially during long flights. He'd been monitoring the seatbelt sign, waiting for it to turn off, but his discomfort was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. "You okay?" Jasmine asked, noticing her brother's discomfort. Yeah, Malcolm replied, glancing toward the bathroom. Just need to use the restroom soon. They both watched as a middle-aged white man got up and walked to the bathroom without any flight attendant intervening. A few minutes later, a white woman did the same. Finally, when the turbulence seemed to have subsided although the sign remained on, Malcolm decided he couldn't wait any longer. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood carefully. "I'll be right back," he told Jasmine. Malcolm made his way to the rear bathroom, walking steadily despite the occasional light bump of turbulence. He had almost reached the bathroom when Heather stepped directly into his path, blocking his way. "Sir, the seatbelt sign is on," she said loudly. "You need to return to your seat immediately." Malcolm gestured politely toward the bathroom. "I understand, but I really need to use the restroom. It's a medical necessity." Heather crossed her arms. "You people never follow rules, do you? The sign is on for everyone's safety." The phrase, "you people," hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several nearby passengers looked up, shocked by the comment. "I'm sorry," Malcolm said, keeping his voice level despite the offense. "I have a kidney condition, and I really need to use the bathroom." "I noticed other passengers were able to." "They weren't disrupting the flight," Heather interrupted. "Return to your seat now, or there will be consequences." From her seat, Sarah Wilson had been watching the exchange. She stood up. "Excuse me, but at least 3 other passengers have used the bathroom in the last 10 minutes, and you didn't say anything to them." Heather turned to Sarah, her expression hardening. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. Please remain seated." "It concerns me when I witness discriminatory treatment," Sarah replied firmly. "This young man has a medical need, and you're denying him the same access you've permitted to others. Are you a doctor?" Heather challenged. "No, but I am a witness to inconsistent enforcement of rules," Sarah responded. Other passengers began to murmur, some nodding in agreement with Sarah. The commotion drew the attention of the flight captain, who had emerged from the cockpit for a brief stretch. Captain Dylan Brady, a tall man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, approached the scene. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice calm but authoritative. "This passenger refuses to obey the seatbelt sign, Captain," Heather said immediately. Malcolm addressed the captain directly. "Sir, I have a medical condition that requires bathroom access. I waited as long as I could and noticed other passengers using the facilities, so I thought it would be all right." Captain Brady glanced at the seatbelt sign, then at the smooth flight conditions outside. He made a quick decision. "The turbulence has subsided. I'll be turning the sign off momentarily." He turned to Malcolm. "Go ahead, son." "Thank you, sir," Malcolm said, relief evident in his voice. As Captain Brady returned to the cockpit, Heather's face flushed with anger. She leaned closer to Malcolm and whispered, "This isn't over." Malcolm used the bathroom as quickly as possible, aware of Heather waiting outside. When he emerged, she was still there, watching him with barely concealed hostility. As Malcolm made his way back to his seat, the seatbelt sign turned off with a soft ding. Several other passengers immediately got up to use the bathrooms, moving past Heather without comment from her. Benjamin had observed the entire interaction. He'd been quietly documenting everything on his phone, creating a detailed record of the escalating pattern of discrimination. When Malcolm returned to his seat, Benjamin turned to make eye contact with his son, raising his eyebrows in a silent question. "I'm okay, Dad," Malcolm assured him quietly. Keisha reached back to squeeze her son's hand. "We'll be landing in a couple of hours," she reminded him gently. Jasmine leaned close to her brother. "I got it all on video," she whispered. "Every word." Malcolm nodded, grateful for his sister's foresight. He tried to refocus on his movie, but the knot in his stomach made it difficult to concentrate. He couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was brewing. In the galley, Heather was complaining loudly to another flight attendant. "Did you see that? The captain completely undermined my authority. The sign was about to go off anyway. Lisa, a more experienced flight attendant in her 50s, replied. And the boy did say he had a medical issue. He was making excuses, Heather insisted. And that passenger in 27C interfering. I'm going to write them all up for non-compliance. Lisa gave Heather a concerned look. Heather, maybe you should take a break. I can cover your section for a while. I don't need a break, Heather snapped. I need passengers to follow the rules. As Heather stormed back into the cabin, Lisa watched her go with a worried expression. Something about this situation felt dangerously close to boiling over. An hour later, Malcolm's discomfort had returned, more intense than before. The kidney condition that usually remained manageable was flaring up, likely due to the stress of the flight. He shifted in his seat, trying to find a position that would alleviate the growing pressure in his lower back. You need to go again, don't you? Jasmine asked quietly, noticing her brother's discomfort. Malcolm nodded, grimacing. I think the stress is making it worse. Just go, Jasmine encouraged. The sign's off, and you have a medical reason. Taking a deep breath, Malcolm stood and made his way toward the rear bathroom again. This time, the seatbelt sign was definitely off, and several other passengers were moving about the cabin. Still, he felt a sense of dread as he approached the galley where Heather was organizing the beverage cart. As Malcolm passed her, Heather stepped directly into his path again, blocking access to the bathroom. Where do you think you're going? She demanded. Malcolm maintained his composure. To the bathroom, ma'am. We're preparing for the final beverage service, Heather said. You'll have to wait. Malcolm gestured to the other passengers using the forward bathrooms. I really can't wait. My kidney condition. I don't want to hear more excuses, Heather interrupted, raising her voice. Return to your seat now. The commotion caught the attention of nearby passengers. Lisa, the older flight attendant, approached with concern. What's happening? She asked. This passenger refuses to follow instructions, Heather said before Malcolm could speak. I just need to use the bathroom, Malcolm explained to Lisa. I have a medical condition that. He claims to have some condition, Heather interjected. But he's just being difficult. I need to call the air marshal. Lisa looked confused. Heather, there's no air marshal on this flight. A man in row 30 stood up. I'm a security professional, he announced. Travis Cooper, off-duty airport security. Can I help? Heather immediately waved him over. Sir, this passenger is being non-compliant and disruptive. Travis Cooper, a white man in his mid-30s with a muscular build, approached cautiously. He assessed the situation, looking between Malcolm and the flight attendants. What seems to be the problem? He asked professionally. I just need to use the bathroom, Malcolm explained calmly. I have a kidney condition that requires frequent bathroom access. The seatbelt sign is off, but she's blocking my way. Cooper turned to Heather. The sign is off, and he has a medical need. Why not let him use the facilities? Heather's face flushed. He's been disruptive the entire flight. I believe he poses a security risk. Malcolm's eyes widened at the accusation. That's completely untrue. I've been in my seat watching movies most of the flight. Lisa intervened. Heather, I think we should let him use the bathroom. There's no security concern here. Malcolm had discreetly activated the voice recording app on his phone when the confrontation began, capturing the entire exchange. The cabin atmosphere had grown tense, with passengers divided in their reactions. Some watched with concern, others deliberately looked away, and a few had their phones out, recording the incident. Sarah Wilson stood up again. This is ridiculous. Let the young man use the bathroom. Ma'am, stay out of this, Heather snapped. Benjamin Washington had also risen from his seat, moving toward the growing confrontation. Malcolm, is everything all right? He called. Before Malcolm could answer, Heather turned to Benjamin. Sir, return to your seat immediately. This doesn't concern you. That's my son, Benjamin replied, his voice calm but authoritative. Captain Brady's voice came over the intercom. This is your captain speaking. I'm aware of a situation in the main cabin. I ask that all passengers remain seated while our crew resolves this matter. Thank you for your cooperation. See? Heather said triumphantly. The captain wants everyone seated. Benjamin made eye contact with his son. Malcolm, are you okay? I just need to use the bathroom, Dad, Malcolm replied, discomfort evident in his voice. Cooper, assessing the situation, turned to Heather. Ma'am, I don't see any security threat here. Let's de-escalate this situation by allowing him bathroom access, then everyone can return to their seats. Passengers around them were growing increasingly uncomfortable with the confrontation. Some were openly recording now, while others murmured in disapproval of Heather's behavior. Is this how your airline typically treats black passengers? Someone called out from the back. The comment caused a ripple of reactions throughout the cabin. I need to pause this intense moment to check in with you all. What would you do if you witnessed this discrimination happening right in front of you? Would you speak up like Sarah, or stay quiet? Comment number 1 if you believe Heather is clearly discriminating against Malcolm, or number 2 if you think she's just doing her job. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their race, and subscribe to see more stories about standing up to injustice. Now, let's see what happens when this situation reaches its breaking point. Captain Brady appeared from the cockpit, assessing the situation. What's going on back here? Captain, I need to speak with you privately, Benjamin said. This situation is escalating unnecessarily. Sir, I need you to return to your seat, Brady replied. I'll handle this. Benjamin reluctantly complied, but not before giving Malcolm a reassuring nod. Brady turned to Heather. Let's allow this young man to use the facilities, and then everyone can return to their seats so we can prepare for our initial descent. Heather looked displeased but stepped aside. Fine. Malcolm quickly entered the bathroom, relief washing over him as the door locked behind him. Outside, he could hear the continued tension, muffled voices arguing about what had transpired. What would happen next would shock everyone on Flight 3387. Malcolm emerged from the bathroom 5 minutes later, his immediate discomfort relieved but his anxiety heightened by the confrontation that awaited him. As he opened the door, he found Heather still standing there, arms crossed. You need to remain here for questioning, she said immediately, blocking his path back to his seat. Malcolm blinked in confusion. Questioning about what? There's damage in the lavatory that wasn't there before you entered, Heather stated, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. What? I didn't damage anything, Malcolm protested, genuinely bewildered. Passengers were watching the exchange with growing concern. Benjamin Washington had risen from his seat again, making his way toward his son. What's going on now? Benjamin called out. Sir, return to your seat immediately. Heather demanded without taking her eyes off Malcolm. I'm not going anywhere until I know what's happening with my son, Benjamin replied firmly, continuing his approach. Lisa, who had been nearby, quickly checked the bathroom. Heather, there's no damage in there, she reported, confusion evident in her voice. You're not looking properly, Heather insisted, then turned back to Malcolm. You need to stay in the galley area until we land. Then you'll be met by airport security. Malcolm stood his ground. I didn't do anything wrong. I want to return to my seat. The tension in the cabin was palpable. Passengers were whispering among themselves, many recording the confrontation on their phones. I'm going to need you to place your hands on the wall and spread your legs, Heather instructed Malcolm, as if conducting a security check. What? No. Malcolm stepped back, alarmed by the escalation. This is ridiculous. I just used the bathroom. Benjamin was now just a few rows away. Malcolm, don't move, he called out. Don't do anything they say without me present. The situation was spiraling out of control. Travis Cooper, the off-duty security guard who had intervened earlier, approached again. "Ma'am, I don't think this level of response is warranted," Cooper said to Heather. "The young man doesn't appear to be a threat." Instead of responding to Cooper, Heather reached into her personal bag and, to everyone's shock, pulled out what appeared to be a personal taser. Gasps echoed through the cabin. Passengers began shouting in alarm. "Put that away," someone yelled. "What are you doing?" another passenger cried out. Lisa's eyes widened in horror. "Heather. That's not authorized on aircraft." Benjamin broke into a run. "Malcolm, don't move," he shouted. Malcolm stood frozen, hands raised instinctively, eyes fixed on the weapon pointed at him. "Please," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I didn't do anything. He's just a child." Benjamin called out, pushing past the last row of seats separating him from his son. Heather's face was contorted with an emotion that went beyond professional concern. "He lunged at me," she claimed, though everyone present could see that Malcolm was standing perfectly still, hands raised. Lisa stepped forward. "Heather, this isn't protocol. Put that away right now." Cooper moved cautiously toward Heather. "Ma'am, lower the weapon. I'm a trained security professional, and there is no threat here." The tension in the cabin had reached a fever pitch. Jasmine had pushed past several passengers to get a better view, her phone recording everything. Keisha was right behind her, terror evident on her face. Malcolm, overwhelmed by the situation, took a single step backward. That slight movement was all the justification Heather needed. Without warning, she fired the taser, sending the electric probes directly into Malcolm's chest. Malcolm's body went rigid, then collapsed to the floor, convulsing as the electricity coursed through him. Jasmine's piercing scream cut through the cabin, "Malcolm!" The cabin erupted in chaos. Passengers jumped to their feet, some shouting in outrage, others in fear. Phones recorded from every angle as Malcolm convulsed on the floor. Benjamin finally reached his son, dropping to his knees beside him. "I'm Benjamin Washington, civil rights attorney and this boy's father," he announced, his voice commanding immediate attention. "Someone restrain that woman and call for medical assistance immediately." Keisha pushed through the crowd, her medical training taking over. "I'm a doctor," she said, kneeling beside her son. "Everyone back up, give him air." Cooper had moved quickly to Heather, grabbing her wrist and forcing her to drop the taser. "That was completely unnecessary force," he said through gritted teeth. Captain Brady burst from the cockpit, taking in the scene with shock. "What the hell happened?" he demanded. "She tasered my son," Benjamin shouted, cradling Malcolm's head as the boy's convulsions began to subside. "A minor. For using the bathroom." Brady turned to Heather, his face pale. "Is that a taser? Those are strictly prohibited on aircraft." Heather struggled against Cooper's restraining grip. "He was threatening me. I was defending myself." "That's a lie," multiple passengers shouted at once. "We all saw what happened. It's all on video." Lisa had retrieved the first aid kit and handed it to Keisha, who was checking Malcolm's vital signs. "He's stable," Keisha announced, relief evident in her voice. "But he needs medical attention as soon as possible." Malcolm's eyes fluttered open, confusion and pain etched across his face. "Mom," he whispered. "I'm here, baby," Keisha reassured him, tears streaming down her face. "You're going to be okay." Benjamin stood, his full 6'3" frame imposing as he addressed the captain. "I want that woman removed from this aircraft immediately and held for assault on a minor. I want her full name and employee information, and I want statements from every witness on this plane." Captain Brady nodded grimly. "Ms. Bailey, you're relieved of duty effective immediately. I'll be contacting the authorities to meet us upon landing." He turned to the rest of the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this incident. We'll be making an emergency landing in Denver so this young man can receive medical attention. Please return to your seats and prepare for descent." As Heather was escorted to the front of the plane by another flight attendant, she frantically reached for her phone, attempting to delete something. "She's trying to delete evidence." Jasmine called out, still recording. Cooper swiftly confiscated Heather's phone. "This will be turned over to the authorities," he told her. Around the cabin, passengers were coordinating, exchanging contact information and ensuring their video evidence was saved and backed up. Sarah Wilson approached Benjamin as Malcolm was being helped to a seat. "Mr. Washington, I'm Sarah Wilson, District Attorney for Los Angeles County. I witnessed everything. You'll have my full statement and support." Benjamin nodded gratefully. "Thank you." As the plane began its descent toward Denver, Benjamin stood in the aisle, addressing the entire cabin in a clear, powerful voice that carried the weight of decades fighting for justice. "What you witnessed today is not an isolated incident. It's a reflection of the systemic racism that continues to plague our society. My son's only crime was existing in a space where someone decided he didn't belong. I want to thank those of you who spoke up, who recorded, who refused to be silent witnesses to injustice. Today, you didn't just help my son, you stood on the right side of history." A hush fell over the cabin, followed by spontaneous applause that spread from row to row. Captain Brady's voice came over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for emergency landing at Denver International Airport. Local authorities and medical personnel will meet us at the gate. Please fasten your seatbelts and prepare for descent." As the plane began its approach to Denver, the Washington family huddled together in silent solidarity, while across the cabin, passengers from all walks of life were united in their witness to injustice, and their determination to see it answered for. The plane touched down at Denver International Airport with a screech of tires and the roar of reverse thrusters. Unlike the usual routine landing, there was no casual unbuckling of seatbelts or reaching for overhead compartments. Instead, a tense silence filled the cabin as passengers remained seated, many still recording with their phones. Captain Brady's voice came over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived at Denver International Airport. Medical personnel and law enforcement are waiting at the gate. I ask that you remain seated until they board the aircraft. The young man who needs medical attention will be deplaned first." In the rear of the aircraft, Benjamin Washington had transformed from concerned father to formidable attorney. His years of courtroom experience were evident in his commanding presence as he stood protectively beside Malcolm, who remained seated, still dazed from the taser attack. "Heather Bailey," Benjamin called out, his voice carrying through the cabin. "I am formally instructing you not to leave this aircraft without providing your full legal name, employee identification number, and contact information for your legal representation." Heather, now seated in the front row under the watchful eye of Travis Cooper, visibly flinched at Benjamin's words. Benjamin continued, addressing the entire cabin, "To all passengers who witnessed this assault on my 17-year-old son, I respectfully request that you preserve any video or audio recordings and provide your contact information before leaving the aircraft. What happened today was not just an assault on my son, it was a criminal act motivated by racial bias, and justice will be served." The aircraft door opened, and paramedics rushed aboard, followed by Denver police officers. Captain Brady directed them to the rear of the plane where Malcolm sat. The paramedics immediately began attending to Malcolm, checking his vital signs and the burn marks on his chest where the taser prongs had made contact. "BP is 140/90, pulse elevated at 110, one paramedic reported. Consistent with taser deployment. We need to get him to the hospital for evaluation." Keisha, still in doctor mode despite her emotional distress, addressed the paramedics. "He has a pre-existing kidney condition that may have been exacerbated by the electrical shock. Please make sure they run a comprehensive renal panel at the hospital." Meanwhile, the police officers approached Heather, who immediately began her defense. "He was threatening me," she insisted, pointing toward Malcolm. "I had to protect myself and the other passengers." Travis Cooper stepped forward. "Officer, I'm Travis Cooper, off-duty airport security at LAX. I witnessed the entire incident, and at no point did that young man pose any threat. The flight attendant escalated the situation and deployed a prohibited weapon on an aircraft against a minor who was simply trying to use the restroom. Lisa, the senior flight attendant, joined them. I can confirm that her account is false. The taser is not airline-issued equipment and is strictly prohibited on aircraft. She brought it aboard personally and concealed it from the crew. One of the officers turned to Captain Brady. "Captain, we'll need your statement as well." Of course, Brady nodded, his expression grim. "I'll also be submitting the cockpit voice recorder and cabin surveillance footage to the investigation." As the officers took Heather into custody, reading her Miranda rights, she continued to protest. "This is reverse racism. I was just doing my job." Sarah Wilson stepped forward, presenting her credentials to the officers. "I'm Sarah Wilson, District Attorney for Los Angeles County. I witnessed the entire incident and can attest that Ms. Bailey's actions were unprovoked, excessive, and potentially racially motivated. I'll be providing my official statement." Benjamin, having ensured that Malcolm was receiving proper medical care, addressed the officers. "Officers, I'm Benjamin Washington, civil rights attorney and the victim's father. I intend to pursue criminal charges for assault on a minor, civil rights violations, and reckless endangerment. I also request that her phone be secured as evidence, as she attempted to delete footage after the incident." One of the officers nodded. "We've already secured her phone, sir. It will be processed according to protocol." As Malcolm was being prepared for transport to the hospital, Jasmine had taken charge of coordinating with the other passengers. She moved through the cabin with remarkable poise for a 17-year-old, collecting contact information and ensuring that video evidence was being properly saved and backed up. "If you witnessed what happened, please share your contact information on this form," she explained, passing out pages from her notebook. "And if you have video, please make sure it's backed up to cloud storage before you leave the airport." The response was overwhelming. Passengers from every section of the plane approached Jasmine, offering their support and evidence. "I got the whole thing," one man said, showing her his phone. "From when she first blocked him from the bathroom until she pulled the taser. I'm a civil rights professor at UCLA," a woman added. "I would be happy to serve as an expert witness if needed." While Jasmine coordinated with passengers, Benjamin delivered a powerful impromptu speech that silenced the entire cabin. "What you witnessed today is why I became an attorney," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. "No parent should have to watch their child being assaulted simply for existing in a space where someone decided they didn't belong. This isn't just about one rogue flight attendant with a taser, it's about the systemic biases that made her feel entitled to wield that weapon against a black teenager who posed no threat." The cabin was completely silent as he continued. "Some of you spoke up. Some of you recorded. Some of you might have felt uncomfortable but didn't know what to do. I'm asking all of you to reflect on this moment. Justice isn't just served in courtrooms, it begins with ordinary people refusing to be silent witnesses to injustice." The gravity of Benjamin's words hung in the air as Malcolm was carefully transferred to a stretcher. Before he was taken off the plane, Malcolm looked up at his father. "Dad," he said weakly, "don't let them make this about anything other than what it really is." Benjamin squeezed his son's hand. "I won't, son. I promise." As Malcolm was wheeled toward the exit, passengers stood in silent respect. Captain Brady approached Benjamin. "Mr. Washington, I want to personally apologize for what happened on my aircraft today. I assure you that this does not reflect the values of Atlantic Airways, and we will cooperate fully with your legal team and law enforcement." Benjamin nodded acknowledgement. "Captain, I appreciate that. But I'll be judging the airline by its actions in the coming days, not its words today." Meanwhile, Heather was being escorted off the plane in handcuffs, still protesting her innocence. "I was following procedures." He was non-compliant. Her words fell on deaf ears as passengers openly recorded her exit, some calling out, "Shame," as she passed. Travis Cooper approached Benjamin before leaving the aircraft. "Mr. Washington, I want to apologize for not intervening sooner. As a security professional, I should have recognized the escalation pattern and taken more decisive action." Benjamin shook his hand. "Mr. Cooper, you did step up when it mattered most. Your testimony will be crucial in ensuring justice is served." As the Washington family prepared to deplane to join Malcolm at the hospital, the airline's regional director had already arrived at the gate, visibly distressed. "Mr. Washington, Mrs. Washington," he said urgently. "I'm Michael Rivera, regional director for Atlantic Airways. I want to assure you that we are taking this incident extremely seriously. We're prepared to offer immediate accommodation in Denver, medical expense coverage, and upgraded travel to Los Angeles when you're ready to continue your journey." Benjamin fixed him with a steady gaze. "Mr. Rivera, my son was just assaulted by your employee. This isn't about upgrades or hotel rooms. This is about accountability and systemic change. I expect a call from your CEO within the hour, and I expect that call to include concrete actions, not just apologies." Rivera nodded, chastened. "Yes, sir. I understand." As the Washington family was escorted through the terminal toward the waiting ambulance, fellow passengers formed an impromptu honor guard, many offering words of support and promises to provide their evidence. Sarah Wilson walked alongside Benjamin. "The DA's office in Denver will likely take the lead on criminal charges, but I'd be happy to consult. And if there's anything my office in LA can do to support your civil case, please don't hesitate to reach out." Benjamin nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Ms. Wilson. I appreciate your allyship." In the midst of this terrible ordeal, Benjamin Washington had transformed a moment of trauma into a powerful catalyst for justice. His son had been attacked, but in response, Benjamin had mobilized an entire plane full of witnesses to stand against discrimination. As they reached the ambulance where Malcolm was being loaded, Keisha turned to Benjamin. "He's going to be okay," she said, tears finally breaking through her professional composure. "And we're going to make sure this never happens to another child." Benjamin embraced his wife tightly. "Yes, we will," he promised. "This ends here." The emergency landing at Denver International Airport set in motion a whirlwind of activity that extended far beyond the confines of Flight 3387. Within minutes of the aircraft's arrival at the gate, social media was flooded with videos of the incident, hashtags like #JusticeForMalcolm and #FlyingWhileBlack trending rapidly across platforms. Malcolm Washington was transported to University Hospital, his family following closely behind in a vehicle provided by airport authorities. Despite the chaos, Benjamin maintained his commanding presence, ensuring that proper procedures were followed every step of the way. "I want a complete medical evaluation," Benjamin instructed the emergency room doctor who met them on arrival. "Including neurological assessment, cardiac monitoring, and comprehensive renal function tests due to his pre-existing kidney condition." Dr. Elena Rodriguez nodded. "We'll take excellent care of him, Mr. Washington. We've been briefed on the situation." While medical staff attended to Malcolm, the scene at Denver International Airport continued to unfold. In a secure area of the terminal, Denver police officers were processing Heather Bailey's arrest, the charges already mounting: assault with a dangerous weapon, child endangerment, unlawful possession of a prohibited device on an aircraft, and potential hate crime enhancements pending investigation. "I want my union representative," Heather demanded as officers cataloged her personal effects. "This is a railroad job. That kid was threatening passenger safety." Detective Marcus Johnson, a veteran officer with Denver PD's Airport Division, reviewed the preliminary evidence on a tablet. "Ms. Bailey, we have over 30 witness statements and at least 12 videos so far, all contradicting your account. I suggest you exercise your right to remain silent until your attorney arrives." Meanwhile, in the main terminal, passengers from Flight 3387 gathered in groups, sharing their experiences and contact information. Jasmine Washington had established an impromptu command center at a gate seating area, collecting witness information and coordinating video evidence with remarkable efficiency. Make sure you upload your video to the secure cloud link I've sent, she instructed a passenger. And please fill out this witness form with your contact details. Sarah Wilson, the Los Angeles District Attorney, had stepped in to assist, lending her legal expertise to the rapidly growing case. What we're seeing here is a textbook civil rights violation, she explained to a group of concerned passengers. The evidence clearly shows discriminatory treatment escalating to unjustified violence against a minor. At a nearby gate, airline executives had convened an emergency meeting. Atlantic Airways CEO Richard Pearson had joined via video conference, his face grave as he received updates on the situation. "This is a catastrophic failure on multiple levels," Pearson stated. "I want a complete investigation into how Bailey was able to bring a taser aboard our aircraft, who knew about it, and why previous complaints about her conduct were never addressed." The airline's legal counsel shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, we've received information that there were 3 prior complaints against Bailey for discriminatory treatment of passengers of color. They were filed but never processed beyond initial documentation." Pearson's expression darkened. "Find me everything on those complaints. And get me a direct line to Benjamin Washington. We need to take responsibility immediately, not hide behind legal maneuvers." Back at the hospital, Malcolm had been stabilized and was undergoing tests. The initial reports were encouraging, no cardiac arrhythmias detected, and his kidney function appeared stable despite the stress of the incident. Keisha sat beside her son's bed, holding his hand while maintaining phone contact with Benjamin, who was handling the legal responses at the airport. "The doctors say he's going to be fine physically," she reported. "But Ben, he's so quiet. I'm worried about the psychological impact." "We'll get him whatever support he needs," Benjamin assured her. "How's Jasmine holding up?" "She's channeling her anger into action," Keisha replied with a hint of pride. "She's coordinating everything with the witnesses like a seasoned paralegal. She definitely has your advocacy genes." At that moment, a hospital staff member knocked gently on the door. "Mrs. Washington. There's a Mr. Pearson on the phone for you and your husband. He says he's the CEO of Atlantic Airways." Keisha put the call on speaker so Benjamin could join remotely. "Mr. and Mrs. Washington," Pearson began, his voice solemn. "First, please accept my deepest apologies for what happened to your son today. There is absolutely no excuse for the treatment he received, and I want you to know that Heather Bailey has been terminated effective immediately." "Termination is the bare minimum, Mr. Pearson," Benjamin replied. "We're more concerned with the systemic issues that allowed this to happen in the first place." "I agree completely," Pearson responded, surprising them both. "We've already begun an internal investigation and discovered that Ms. Bailey had previous complaints of discriminatory behavior that were improperly handled. This represents a significant failure in our systems, and I'm personally overseeing a complete overhaul of our complaint processing and anti-bias training programs." Benjamin exchanged a glance with Keisha before responding. "Mr. Pearson, I appreciate your directness. However, we'll be proceeding with legal action. This isn't just about one employee, it's about ensuring lasting change in how airlines treat passengers of color." "I understand and respect that decision," Pearson replied. "We're prepared to cooperate fully with any investigation and legal proceedings. In the meantime, we'd like to offer immediate assistance, medical expenses, accommodations, transportation, whatever your family needs right now. We'll have our legal team contact yours regarding immediate needs," Benjamin said professionally. "But make no mistake, Mr. Pearson, this case will be tried in the court of public opinion as well as the court of law. The videos are already viral. Indeed, outside the controlled environment of the hospital and airport, the story was exploding across media channels. Major news networks had picked up the footage, analysts debating the legal and social implications while the videos of Malcolm being tasered played on repeat. #Boycott Atlantic Airways was gaining traction, the airline's stock price already dropping in after-hours trading. Back at the Denver airport, the remaining passengers from Flight 3387 were being rebooked on alternative flights to Los Angeles or accommodated in local hotels. Many, however, chose to delay their journeys to provide formal statements to investigators. Travis Cooper, the off-duty security professional who had intervened, gave a detailed statement to Denver police and FAA officials. "In my professional opinion, there was zero justification for use of force in that situation," he stated firmly. The young man presented no threat, made no aggressive movements, and was in full compliance with reasonable requests. The deployment of a taser was grossly disproportionate and potentially deadly in an aircraft environment. As evening fell, Malcolm was cleared for release from the hospital, though doctors recommended follow-up care once the family reached Los Angeles. The Washington family gathered in a private waiting area, discussing their next steps. "The National Bar Association conference starts tomorrow," Benjamin noted. "We have a decision to make." "You should still receive your award, Dad," Malcolm said, speaking up for the first time since the incident. His voice was quiet but determined. "What happened to me is exactly why your work matters." Jasmine nodded in agreement. "Malcolm's right. We can't let this stop us." Keisha looked at her children with a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you sure you're up for traveling again so soon, Malcolm?" Malcolm straightened in his chair. "I'm not going to let fear win, Mom. Besides, I think I need to be there, to show that they didn't break me." Benjamin studied his son's face, seeing not just the boy he'd raised but the man he was becoming. "If you're certain, then we'll continue to Los Angeles. But we do it on our terms." A knock at the door interrupted them. Lisa, the senior flight attendant who had attempted to intervene during the incident, stood hesitantly in the doorway. "Excuse me, Mr. Washington. I wanted to check on Malcolm and to let you know that the entire remaining crew has provided statements supporting your account of events. We're all horrified by what happened." Benjamin nodded appreciation. "Thank you, Lisa. Your intervention likely prevented the situation from becoming even worse." Lisa looked down, clearly emotional. "I should have done more, sooner. I knew Heather had issues with passengers of color. We all did. But the company kept shuffling her around instead of addressing it. Would you be willing to provide that information in an official statement?" Benjamin asked. Lisa straightened her shoulders. "Already have. And I've encouraged other crew members to come forward about previous incidents they've witnessed. This has been going on too long." As Lisa left, Benjamin turned back to his family. "Atlantic Airways has arranged a private charter to Los Angeles for us tomorrow morning. Captain Brady has volunteered to fly it personally as a gesture of good faith. Do we trust them?" Jasmine asked skeptically. "Not entirely," Benjamin admitted. "But I believe Captain Brady is sincere. And more importantly, I believe in not letting fear dictate our actions." That night, as the Washington family rested in a hotel suite provided by the airline, the incident continued to reverberate across the country. News channels featured legal experts analyzing the case, civil rights leaders calling for broader industry reforms, and social media campaigns demanding justice for Malcolm. In a quiet moment before sleep, Malcolm scrolled through his phone, reading the thousands of supportive messages flooding in from across the country. For the first time since the incident, he smiled. "Dad," he called softly to Benjamin, who was reviewing legal documents nearby. "Look at this." Benjamin came to sit beside his son, looking at the phone screen. A video montage showed people of all races and backgrounds holding signs with messages of support, "Standing with Malcolm," "Flying while black shouldn't be dangerous," "Justice for the Washington family." "This is bigger than just us now, isn't it?" Malcolm asked. Benjamin put his arm around his son's shoulders. "It always was, son. But now people are finally paying attention." 3 days after the incident on Flight 3387, the Washington family walked into the grand ballroom of the Los Angeles Convention Center to thunderous applause. The National Bar Association's annual conference had been abuzz with discussion of the incident, and Benjamin Washington's scheduled acceptance speech for the Lifetime Achievement Award had become the most anticipated event of the gathering. Malcolm walked slightly behind his father, still moving carefully due to lingering soreness from the taser burns on his chest. Despite his physical discomfort, he held his head high, determined to show strength in the face of the hundreds of legal professionals watching him. As the Washington family took their seats in the front row, NBA President Elaine Thornton approached the podium. "Distinguished members and guests," she began, her voice resonating through the packed ballroom. "We gather today to honor the exceptional career of Benjamin Washington, whose 30 years of civil rights advocacy have changed the landscape of American justice. But we also gather in solidarity with the Washington family, who have experienced firsthand the very injustice that Benjamin has spent his career fighting against." The crowd rose in a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. When Benjamin finally took the stage, the room fell into a respectful silence. "Thank you," he began, setting aside his prepared remarks. "3 days ago, I was preparing to deliver a speech about my career fighting for equal justice under law. Today, I stand before you not just as an attorney, but as a father whose child was assaulted for the crime of existing in a space where someone decided he didn't belong." Benjamin gestured for his family to join him on stage. As Malcolm, Jasmine, and Keisha rose to stand beside him, the audience applauded again. "This is my son, Malcolm," Benjamin continued, placing a gentle hand on Malcolm's shoulder. 3 days ago, he was tasered on an airplane for attempting to use the bathroom while black. The flight attendant who assaulted him is now facing criminal charges, but this case is about much more than one rogue employee. For the next 20 minutes, Benjamin delivered a powerful address that transformed from an acceptance speech into a rallying cry for systemic change in how America's transportation systems treat passengers of color. He detailed not just Malcolm's experience but connected it to a broader pattern of discrimination documented across the industry. "The preliminary research my team has already uncovered shows that complaints of discriminatory treatment on airlines are filed at 3 times the rate by passengers of color, yet they're resolved at only half the rate of complaints filed by white passengers," Benjamin revealed. "This isn't about comfort or convenience, it's about safety, dignity, and equal protection under the law." As Benjamin concluded his speech, he made an unprecedented announcement. "Today, I'm establishing the Transportation Equality Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to documenting, litigating, and reforming discriminatory practices across all modes of public transportation. And I'm honored to announce that Malcolm will serve as the project's first youth ambassador." Malcolm stepped forward, visibly nervous but determined. The audience fell silent as the teenager approached the microphone. "3 days ago, I was just a high school student looking forward to watching my dad receive an award," he began, his voice gaining strength with each word. "Now I'm standing here as someone whose personal trauma has been viewed by millions. It's not a role I asked for, but it's one I accept, because if my experience can prevent this from happening to someone else, then at least some good will come from it." The crowd listened intently as Malcolm, drawing on his debate team experience, articulated how the incident had affected him not just physically but emotionally and psychologically. "The worst part wasn't the physical pain," he revealed. "It was the helplessness, the knowledge that no matter how politely I spoke, no matter how carefully I followed instructions, I was still seen as a threat simply because of the color of my skin." By the time Malcolm finished speaking, many in the audience were visibly moved. The standing ovation that followed lasted until the entire Washington family had left the stage. Meanwhile, across the country, the case against Heather Bailey was building rapidly. Denver District Attorney James Rodriguez had announced hate crime enhancements to the charges, citing evidence of clear racial bias in her treatment of Malcolm compared to white passengers. At Atlantic Airways headquarters, the fallout continued. CEO Richard Pearson had announced a company-wide audit of discrimination complaints, mandatory retraining for all customer-facing staff, and the formation of a passenger equity advisory board comprised of civil rights experts and community leaders. But these corporate measures did little to stem the public relations disaster. The airline's stock had dropped 15% in 3 days, cancellations were at an all-time high, and a consumer boycott was gaining momentum across social media platforms. In a downtown Los Angeles law office, Benjamin met with a team of attorneys who had volunteered to assist with the civil case. "We've secured statements from 78 passengers and crew members," reported Elena Gonzalez, a prominent civil rights attorney who had offered her services pro bono. "The evidence is overwhelming, not just of the assault itself but of the pattern of discriminatory treatment leading up to it." "What about the airline's previous knowledge of Bailey's behavior?" Benjamin asked. Another attorney, Marcus Chen, pulled up a document on his tablet. "We've identified 7 formal complaints against Bailey for discriminatory treatment of passengers of color over the past 3 years. In each case, the airline conducted a cursory investigation and then transferred her to a different route rather than addressing the behavior. That establishes a pattern of negligent retention and supervision," Benjamin noted. "And it transforms this from an incident involving a single employee to a systemic failure of corporate policy." As the legal team continued their strategy session, Jasmine had established her own command center in an adjacent conference room. Working with journalism students from UCLA, she was organizing the massive amount of video evidence, creating a chronological compilation that documented every interaction between Malcolm and the flight crew. "We've synchronized footage from 12 different passenger angles," Jasmine explained to her father when he checked in on her progress. "It creates an irrefutable timeline that completely contradicts Bailey's claim of feeling threatened." Benjamin watched with pride as his daughter directed the team with natural leadership. "You're doing incredible work, Jasmine." "I'm just getting started, Dad," she replied with determination. "Malcolm isn't the only one this has happened to. We've already received messages from 47 people who've experienced similar discrimination on Atlantic Airways flights alone." The next day brought another unexpected development. Travis Cooper, the security professional who had intervened during the incident, announced the formation of a new consulting firm specializing in de-escalation training for transportation personnel. "What I witnessed on that flight was a complete failure of training and judgment," Cooper stated in a press conference. "As security professionals, our first duty is to protect everyone's safety, not to escalate situations based on bias or fear." Cooper revealed that he had declined a settlement offer from Atlantic Airways in exchange for his silence. "This isn't about money for me, it's about changing a culture that views certain passengers as inherent threats based solely on the color of their skin." By the end of the week, as the Washington family prepared to return home to Atlanta, the case had evolved from a single incident into a national conversation about race, transportation, and civil rights. Major news networks featured daily updates, legal experts analyzed the potential impact of the case on industry regulations, and civil rights organizations rallied behind the Transportation Equality Project. On their final night in Los Angeles, the Washington family gathered in their hotel suite, reflecting on the whirlwind week. "Are you ready to go home, Malcolm?" Keisha asked gently, noticing her son staring thoughtfully out the window at the city lights. "I'm not sure home will feel the same," he admitted. "Everything's different now." Benjamin joined his son at the window. "Change isn't always comfortable, son. But sometimes it's necessary." Malcolm turned to his father. "The airline offered a 7-figure settlement today, didn't they?" Benjamin nodded. "They did. But money isn't what this case is about." "What did you tell them?" Malcolm asked. "I told them we're not interested in private compensation that leaves the system unchanged," Benjamin replied. "I told them we want public accountability, transparent policy reforms, and industry-wide changes that protect every passenger, regardless of race." Malcolm smiled for the first time in days. "Good answer, Dad." As the Washington family prepared for their journey home, this time on a different airline, they knew that while the immediate crisis was behind them, the real work of creating lasting change was just beginning. 1 month after the incident on Flight 3387, Malcolm Washington sat before the U.S. House Transportation Committee, his voice steady as he recounted his experience to a panel of attentive legislators. The congressional hearing, titled "Discrimination in Air Travel: Examining Bias in America's Skies," had been called in direct response to the viral footage of Malcolm's assault. "I was tasered for attempting to use the bathroom," Malcolm testified, the chamber completely silent as he spoke. "Not for breaking any law, not for threatening anyone, but simply because a flight attendant saw my black skin as inherently threatening." The power of Malcolm's testimony was undeniable. At just 17, he articulated the experience with a clarity and composure that left even veteran politicians momentarily speechless. When he finished, committee chairwoman Representative Eleanor Martinez leaned forward. "Mr. Washington, your courage in coming forward has forced this committee, and this country, to confront an uncomfortable reality about discrimination in our transportation systems. Thank you for your testimony." In the month since the incident, developments had moved at an extraordinary pace. Heather Bailey faced multiple felony charges, including assault with a dangerous weapon, child endangerment, and hate crime enhancements. Her trial was scheduled for the following spring, but the court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict, with polls showing over 80% of Americans believing she had acted with racial bias. Atlantic Airways had initially attempted to contain the damage through a traditional crisis management playbook, offering the Washington family a substantial private settlement while issuing carefully worded public statements about investigating the incident and reaffirming commitment to diversity. Benjamin Washington had rejected their approach outright. In a move that shocked corporate America, he published a confidential settlement offer, $7 million contingent on a non-disclosure agreement, alongside his response, "Justice cannot be purchased in private. Real change requires public accountability." The airline stock plummeted another 12% that day. Faced with an existential crisis, Atlantic Airways CEO Richard Pearson made an unprecedented decision. He fired the company's entire executive leadership team, brought in respected civil rights leaders as consultants, and announced a comprehensive transformation plan developed in consultation with the Washington family's legal team. Today, as Malcolm testified before Congress, Pearson sat directly behind him, waiting his turn to address the committee. When Malcolm concluded his testimony, Benjamin joined his son at the witness table for the next phase of questioning. Representative James Wilson, ranking member of the committee, addressed Benjamin directly. "Mr. Washington, your family has declined significant financial compensation in favor of pursuing systemic changes. Can you elaborate on what specific reforms you believe are necessary?" Benjamin leaned toward the microphone. Representative Wilson, monetary damages address past harm but do nothing to prevent future victims. We're advocating for 4 specific reforms. First, mandatory data collection and public reporting of all discrimination complaints across all airlines. Second, standardized anti-bias training for all flight crews developed by civil rights experts, not corporate HR departments. Third, transparent investigation protocols for discrimination complaints with independent oversight. And fourth, clear consequences for companies that fail to address patterns of discriminatory treatment. The questioning continued for nearly 2 hours, with committee members from both parties engaging substantively with the proposed reforms. When Richard Pearson finally took the witness seat, he surprised everyone with his opening statement. "Chairwoman Martinez, distinguished committee members, I appear before you today not to defend my company's actions, but to acknowledge our failure and commit to meaningful change. The treatment Malcolm Washington experienced on our aircraft reflects systemic problems that extend far beyond one employee. Today, I'm announcing Atlantic Airways' full support for the Washington family's proposed reforms, not just for our airline but for the entire industry." Pearson went on to detail the comprehensive changes already implemented at Atlantic Airways, a complete overhaul of complaint processing systems, mandatory bias training developed in partnership with civil rights organizations, the establishment of a passenger advocacy office with independent oversight, and the creation of the Malcolm Washington Scholarship for young people pursuing careers in transportation equity. Following the congressional hearing, the Washington family held a press conference on the Capitol steps. Standing together, they presented a united front that had come to symbolize the broader fight for equality in American transportation. "Today marks an important step forward," Benjamin told the assembled press. "But legislation alone cannot change hearts and minds. Real transformation requires each of us to recognize and challenge the biases that lead to discriminatory treatment." Over the subsequent months, the impact of the Washington family's advocacy continued to expand. The Transportation Equality Project, founded in the aftermath of Malcolm's assault, grew into a powerful force for change, documenting hundreds of similar incidents and providing legal support to victims of discrimination across all modes of transportation. Jasmine Washington's methodical documentation of the incident became a case study in digital evidence collection, taught in journalism schools nationwide. Her comprehensive approach to gathering and organizing witness statements and video evidence had created an irrefutable record that proved crucial in both the criminal case against Heather Bailey and the civil action against Atlantic Airways. Sarah Wilson, the Los Angeles district attorney who had witnessed the incident, formed a specialized civil rights division within her office, partnering with Benjamin's firm to develop new protocols for investigating transportation-related discrimination cases. Keisha Washington channeled her medical expertise into groundbreaking research on the physical and psychological impacts of racial discrimination in public spaces, securing a major grant to study how repeated exposure to discriminatory treatment affects cardiovascular and mental health in communities of color. Travis Cooper expanded his security consulting firm, developing specialized training programs that emphasize de-escalation techniques and bias awareness for transportation security personnel nationwide. His firm quickly became the industry standard, contracted by airports, airlines, and transit authorities across the country. Even Flight 3387's Captain Dylan Brady found purpose in the aftermath, accepting a position as Atlantic Airways' new Director of Crew Training, where he integrated civil rights perspectives into every aspect of flight crew preparation. 1 year to the day after the incident, Malcolm Washington stood at the gate of Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, preparing to board a flight to visit colleges in California. Though he had flown several times since the incident, each journey still brought a flutter of anxiety. "You sure you're okay flying alone?" Benjamin asked, standing with him at the security checkpoint. Malcolm nodded. "I need to do this, Dad. Can't let fear win, remember?" Benjamin embraced his son, now taller than him by an inch. "I'm so proud of you, Malcolm. More than you'll ever know." As Malcolm boarded the flight, he was greeted by a diverse flight crew that reflected the airline's renewed commitment to inclusive hiring practices. The lead flight attendant, recognizing him immediately, offered a warm smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Washington. It's an honor to have you with us today." Taking his window seat, Malcolm settled in, noticing how different the experience felt from that fateful day a year ago. Around him, passengers were being treated with equal courtesy regardless of race, the flight crew operating with a new awareness that had transformed the culture of the entire industry. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Malcolm looked out at the vast blue sky and felt something he hadn't experienced on a flight in a long time: peace. His father had told him once that true justice wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing but about creating a world where such wrongs became increasingly rare. Looking around the cabin, at flight attendants trained under new protocols his family had helped establish, Malcolm realized they had done exactly that. The incident on Flight 3387 had begun with discrimination and violence, but it had evolved into something powerful and transformative, a catalyst for change that would protect countless future travelers from experiencing what he had endured. As the plane lifted into the sky, Malcolm Washington smiled. His father had won many legal victories in courtrooms throughout his distinguished career, but perhaps none as meaningful as the one they had achieved together, not just justice for one family, but a lasting transformation of an entire system. The Washington family's story teaches us several powerful lessons about confronting racial discrimination. First, documentation is crucial. Jasmine's quick thinking to record evidence created an irrefutable record that proved essential for justice. Second, individual courage can spark systemic change. Malcolm's willingness to stand firm despite trauma transformed a personal assault into a national movement for transportation equality. Third, justice requires both accountability and reform. Benjamin's refusal to accept private settlement in favor of public accountability demonstrates that meaningful change demands transparency. Fourth, allyship matters. From Sarah Wilson's immediate intervention to Travis Cooper's testimony, those who spoke up amplified the Washington family's fight for justice. Finally, the most profound lesson is that transformative change often begins with a single act of injustice properly confronted. The Washington family could have retreated into privacy after their trauma. Instead, they channeled their pain into purpose, creating lasting reforms that would protect countless future travelers. True justice isn't merely punishing wrongdoing, it's creating systems where such wrongs become increasingly rare. What would you have done in the Washington family's position? Would you have taken the settlement money or fought for systemic change? Comment below with your thoughts. If you believe in standing up against discrimination, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories of courage and justice, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories that can change hearts and minds. Thank you for watching, and remember, when we refuse to accept injustice as normal, we create the possibility for a more equitable world for everyone.